much for joining us for Life's Disability 411 station. Um, Life stands for Living Independence for Everyone. We are an organization run by and for people with disabilities. And so today, the majority of our staff are made up of people with disabilities. So today we're presenting tips and information to help you to better interact with people with disabilities, because there's no need for anyone to ever feel awkward around people with disabilities. My name is Denise Howard. I'm the program director, and I also handle assistive technology. And my co-workers that will be presenting with me today are Angel Donardi. She's our associate director. Rachel Black, she's our newest independent living coordinator. Clay Mims, our nursing home transition coordinator. Shannon Ginn, he's our peer support coordinator. Marquise Morgan, he's also an independent living coordinator for our satellite office. And also joining us today on staff, our executive director is Neil Ligon, Chastity Ortiz, and she is our coordinator for our Students for Life transition program. So again, thank you all for joining us for our Disability 411 presentation. The mission of Life is to promote independent living and advance community change for everyone. So the services that we provide are to help individuals with disabilities, to support them to live the lives that they want to live, to be the leaders in their lives. And so we provide a variety of services to support them with that endeavor, including advocacy, help with assistive technology and adaptive equipment, peer support, independent living skills training, home modifications, transition services. We provide both youth transition, helping them to prepare for adulthood and employment or whatever they choose to do after graduation. We also provide nursing home transition, which is getting people out of institutions back into community living. And I think I've touched on the majority of our services, but our goal is helping people with disabilities to achieve their independent living goals. And whatever we can do along those lines to support individuals to have the same rights and responsibilities and privileges as everyone else. That's what we're here for in the foundation of our organization. Anyone that has a significant disability that lives within our service area, our 20 county service area is eligible for services. Anyone who has a goal or a desire to be more independent or to increase or maintain their independence, again, is eligible for our services. Who are people with disabilities? Let's talk about that. Well, people with disabilities are all of us, and that's because over 54 million individuals in the United States have a disability that affects their ability to see, hear, walk, talk, communicate, think. And so if we live long enough, all of us will age into a disability. And that 54 million number, that number is actually expected to double due to aging baby boomers and military vets returning home with injuries. Disability is really a natural part of the human experience. It's just a fact of life. Life happens to all of us. We're all getting older, we're all aging. Sometimes we're born with a disability. Accidents happen. It's just a part of life. Disability is the only minority that anyone can join at any time, because again, life happens. Next, I'd like to show you a brief video No need to feel awkward.
Okay, give me 1 second to bring it up. And give me a shout if anyone is having trouble with the sound.
Good morning, Bob.
Morning there, big man. Morning, Alice!
There's no need to be awkward. Poor Bob. Like so many of us, he just doesn't know how to interact with people with disabilities.
It's pretty easy, really. People with disabilities are people first.
We need the same things that every person needs, like respect.
Good morning, everyone.
Attention!
Okay. Maybe we need to be more specific.
The easiest way to show respect is to focus on the person, not the disability. It's okay. You'll get the hang of it.
One easy way to focus on the person is to watch the person signing and not their interpreter.
Or their companion.
It's really cool that you'd like to help, but do us both a favor and please ask me first. What you think might be helping
I got you.
Wait, ah! Oh no, might actually not.
If you'd like to offer me help, let me hold on to your elbow. Don't take mine.
Hey, would you like to take my arm?
Sure.
Assistive devices help us to live our lives. They're really important and really personal.
Grabbing them only makes it weird for everyone.
What? Please only touch our devices and service animals if we've given you permission. And don't take it personally if I ask you not to. Remember that my service animal helps me all the time. Neither of us would like it if we were separated.
Remember, we make our own decisions. We sign documents, vote, volunteer, work, and pay taxes.
We get married.
So don't address me just because I have a great smile.
Just because I'm blind
May I help you?
does not mean I'm deaf.
I don't know. I think he said he was going to come. Just because I'm deaf doesn't mean I'm blind.
And just because I use a wheelchair doesn't mean that I can't sweep you off your feet.
So take a deep breath. Relax. We don't bite.
Unless we're really hungry.
Hello there, ladies. How are you?
Hello. And if you're not sure what to do, just ask.
Hi, would you still like to see a menu?
No thanks, but can you please read it to me?
Sure, definitely.
Just treat us the way you would want to be treated, and we'll all be okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Alice.
Morning.
Awkward no more. Nice.
Okay. Disability etiquette is making everyone feel welcome. It's about simple respect. So here are some simple tips to keep in mind and some takeaways from the video. Ask before you act. When offering assistance, always remember to ask before you act. Also, talk directly to the person with the disability, not their aide, companion, or sign language interpreter. We can speak for ourselves. So please, if you have a question or if there's something that you want to know about us, talk to us directly. Again, not to our aide, not to our sign language interpreter. Next, when offering assistance, some people rely, on their arms for balance. So never grab a person. Always offer your arm instead. And don't assume the person with a disability is the best judge of what they can and can't do. So never assume, because we all know what happened when you assume. Treat adults as adults. And last but not least, relax. Don't be afraid of making a mistake. And if you do make a mistake, just apologize. It's okay to make mistakes, and you will make mistakes. So again, it's all about simple respect. Let's talk about people first language. People first language is a way of acknowledging that we are people, we as people with disabilities are people first. Disability is simply one of our many characteristics, and we aren't defined by our disability. It doesn't mean that we're ashamed of it, but nevertheless, it's recognition that we are whole people. So with disability first language, we put the person before the disability. In other words, a person with a disability, a person with cerebral palsy, a person who is hard of hearing, a person who has a mobility disability. See the person beyond their label. Labels are for cans, because with a can, a label identifies what's on the inside of that can, but a label doesn't identify what's inside of a person. So you may hear us refer to disability first language in addressing people with disabilities. Avoid outdated terms such as handicapped. As you know, words change, the meaning of words changes with time. And so handicap is one of those words that we like to avoid and substitute with disability instead. So these are some common tips to keep in mind. And as you get to know a person, if they prefer to be addressed differently, then we certainly will respect that. But until we get to know a person, in the Center for Independent Living world, we use disability first language. Next is my coworker, Rachel Black, who's going to be talking about invisible disabilities. Okay, Rachel, take it away.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So the tips for invisible disability, and when I talk about invisible disability, I'm talking about things such as brain injury, PTSD, ADHD, dyslexia, interstitial cystitis, epilepsy, autoimmune disorders. But the three main tips are: first, don't assume that if you can't see a disability that it doesn't exist. We think sometimes because disabilities are not obvious that they're not serious, or that we don't have to take them into consideration. The second tip is never ask a person if they have a disability. You would never want to go up to someone and just make the assumption that they do have a disability. Assumptions can make you look bad. And the last tip is understand that there are a variety of invisible illnesses. So a person with an invisible illness can be struggling with a variety of different things, and we need to be considerate of those.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. Next, I'll share tips for how to interact or assist individuals who are blind and low vision. My name again is Denise. First, when you're approaching someone who's blind or low vision, identify yourself. In other words, say your name We will eventually get to know your voice, but until we do, it helps whenever we are meeting with you in an unfamiliar place, or if we haven't had many interactions, if you would just identify yourself. Next, never grab a person. We've talked about this earlier, but when offering assistance, always offer your arm and then wait for a person to accept. And if they say no, that's okay too, but you want to offer your arm and never ever grab a person. Next, don't be afraid of using words that seem to relate to a person's disability, like see, look, watch. I use those words all the time, even though I'm blind. I don't say I listen to TV. I say I watch TV. I don't say here, feel this. I say look at this. Those are just figures of speech, and so it's okay to use words like, again, see, look, watch around someone who is blind or low vision. Next up is Clay Mims. CT, take it away.
Get myself off the mute, sorry. My name's Clay Mims. I was born with cerebral palsy, so I have grown up with mobility issues and pretty much dealt with them all my life. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Basically, the main thing with someone with a mobility issue is just don't assume that they can't do something. Don't do it for them. Growing up, I was pretty much able to do anything that anyone else can, and people would attempt to pick something up for me or try to do it for me, and I would stop them and say that I could do it. The other thing is, don't be afraid to ask questions. I've always been kind of an open book, and never be scared to ask me about my disability or anything like that. As far as wheelchairs go, as part of a person who's in a wheelchair, it's part of their space. So don't ever lean on their wheelchair without permission or hang things on it and that kind of thing. And if you have a conversation with a person in a wheelchair, always kneel down to eye level with them to show respect for, you're speaking with them eye to eye. Let's see. I think there's some more. Yeah, here we go. Wheelchair is mainly it's a freedom for persons with disabilities, so they are able to go out and in the community and enjoy life as everyone else. It's not a tragedy for them, it's freedom. So always respect persons in wheelchairs or anyone with a mobility issue. I tend to stumble and fall sometimes, and that's just part of my disability. I get up and keep going. I always make the joke, if I fall, I'll laugh for a few minutes and I'll get back up and carry on. So I think all of us with disabilities are like that, and we want to, if we need help, we will ask you for help, and just respect us as you would anyone else.
Okay, thank you, Clay. Or as we call him, CT. Next up is our peer support coordinator, Shannon Ginn.
Hello, everybody. My name is Shannon. Be talking about deaf and deaf or hard of hearing. With that, you would always want to talk directly to the person. You want to always, when you're talking with a person with deaf or hard of hearing, you want to speak directly to the person because they be able to read your lips, because they can read your lips, and you want to make sure that when you're doing that, that you speak clearly and with a regular tone of voice. Also, if you have a disability or don't have a disability and know how to do sign language, you want to make sure that you are doing it correctly, because if you are not, you could offend the person. Also, another tip is that if you're trying to get the attention of a person that is deaf or hard of hearing, you can do that by waving your hand in front of the person or tapping on the shoulder. If that doesn't seem to work, you can always write down what you're trying to say to them and show that to them as well. Also, if a deaf or hard of hearing person is being accompanied by an interpreter, you want to always speak to the deaf or hard of hearing person, not the interpreter, and always speak directly to that person and speak clearly to them and not the interpreter. Also, lastly, that people with hearing loss, they can use facial expressions, gestures, and body motions to assess what you are trying to say most of the time as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Shannon. Next up, we have Miss Angel Denardi.
Hey, thank you, Denise. Thank you, Shannon, CT, and Rachel. My name is Angel Denardi, as Denise said, and I'm the Associate Director at Life. I am a person with a disability. My disability is not a speech impediment. My disability is an invisible disability that Rachel spoke about. I do have experience with a person who acquired a speech impediment as the result of a stroke. It is one of my best friends that I've known for many, many years. And prior to his stroke, just like most of you, he could speak without any problem. As soon as he had his stroke, he was unable to communicate verbally. And we had to figure out ways to communicate, kind of thinking outside of the box. So sometimes when you're talking to a person with a speech impediment, it takes a little bit of outside of the box thinking. The most important thing is not to be tempted to finish their sentences for them. No matter how long it takes for them to finish their sentence, if it's stuttering, if it's aphasia, if it's something that they're struggling to find a word, if it's as the result of dementia, traumatic brain injury, anything along those lines, just be patient. The world is already going so fast. And quite often for a person with any kind of speech impediment, the most frustrating thing about their day is the inability to communicate something that's important to them. It could be if, for instance, they're in the hospital and they're lying in a bed and they're really hot, and someone comes in and is doing something with an IV or something along those lines. If they don't pay attention to the person, they're not going to know that the person's even trying to communicate. And that's one of the pitfalls, is that if a person has a speech impediment or is unable to speak at all verbally, it doesn't mean they're not able to speak, it just means they're not able to speak verbally, that people assume that they don't know what's going on, or that they potentially have a cognitive disability, which isn't always the case. So if you just give them time, be patient, and usually you'll get through one way or the other, even if you do have to think outside the box. Sometimes it's written, sometimes it's pointing. It has to do with facial expression, anything along those lines. The important thing is just to try. If you make a mistake, if you misunderstand them, then start over. But treat them with respect, treat them with patience, look directly at them, and by all means, never mimic or mock a person with a speech impediment. It's difficult enough when they're trying to communicate, and a person that feels minimized or made fun of is unlikely to want to interact with you, and you might be missing out on a really good conversation. Just because it's a different type of conversation doesn't mean that it's not valuable, and you could have fun, or you can get to know somebody. So the last thing is, and this is something that we're tempted to do when interacting with a person with a speech impediment, is to pretend you know what they said, which can result in some pretty big misunderstandings. And so if you really aren't sure what they said, there's no harm in asking them to repeat themselves. And if you still can't figure it out, resort to pen and paper or just apologize. Eventually you'll get there. It can be a little frustrating, but it's worth it. And again, just take your time, be patient, and know that it's a person that you're talking to first and foremost, and that's what you don't want to forget. And I would like to introduce next my colleague, Mr. Marquise Morgan, who will give you the 411 on cognitive disabilities.
Good afternoon. My name is Marquise Morgan. I'm an independent living coordinator here at Life. And cognitive disabilities, there's sort of a wide range of them. You have things like delirium, amnesia, Alzheimer's and dementia. And really the main focus is, and these can sometimes be invisible as well, just like Angel said and Rachel said. Sometimes, especially when they're having days where they're having what they call it, they have good days. And sometimes they have days where the disability affects them a bit more. So the main things you want, as always, with dealing with anyone are patience and compassion, especially given certain disabilities like Alzheimer's and dementia. Sometimes the person will become easily confused or sometimes easily frustrated. And it can be very frustrating for the caregiver as well, or the person helping them as well. But we have to remember that oftentimes they're aware of the problems and they feel frustrated too. And it's not their fault. You can't lose that sort of patience with them if they're forgetting something or are focused on a certain task, like a fixation, or are just seeming lost as to what you're saying. So just, breathe and concentrate with them. If they're not understanding you, it's okay to repeat yourself, and you don't want to belittle them either. These are still adults and they still need to be respected and treated with kindness and compassion. So it's okay to use simpler language without, baby talking somebody, because these aren't children. They're not children. They just have a specific disability that affects their problem solving, their learning, etc. Try using different words. And sometimes it's okay to go along with some of the things they say. But you don't want to frustrate people by saying, no, that's wrong, or chastising them for saying something. And it's okay to, and oftentimes you'll run into, good days, bad days, like everyone has, where this disability is affecting them in a way where they're a bit more forgetful or are fixated on a certain topic. It's okay to just remember that certain things take time, and just remember to keep an open mind, keep yourself listening and attentive to them and what they need, and you can work together and make sure they get through it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Marquise. So what we are all saying is that we could summarize our presentation by stating, let common courtesy and respect govern all your interactions. And again, if you make a mistake, it's okay. In fact, you will make mistakes. And just apologize and move on. Next, we're going to have questions and answers. And we'd also like any feedback or stories or tips that you would like to share. We also have some questions. So are there any questions or comments or tips that you would like to share?
There's one that came across, Denise. I can share a question that came across.
Okay, sure.
Here's one. It says, are you allowed to demand proof from someone who parks in an accessible parking space but doesn't look like they have a disability?
No, you're not allowed to demand proof.
So I guess the question really is something that has probably popped into all of our minds. When we go to park somewhere, someone gets out of their vehicle that doesn't have an obvious disability. We can't help but wonder, is that person faking so that they can park closer? Probably not. I'm sure that it happens, but it's not necessarily easy to get an accessible parking plaque. And for the most part, as Rachel touched on earlier, invisible disabilities really are variable. And once in a while, you'll have a person with a disability that has pain as a factor. And some days are better than others. And once in a while, if you see a person park in a spot and they get up, get out of their car and get into a cart, they're probably using that cart as a tool for endurance and or to help prevent pain while they're shopping. It doesn't mean that they can't walk. It just means that they're utilizing tools and opportunities for parking closer that will help them get through their day. They might not have the ability and wherewithal to accomplish everything in their day without taking these extra steps to kind of get through their days. One of the things that I often share when someone asks me these questions is something called the spoon theory. And the spoon theory was written by someone, and it can be found on a website called But You Don't Look Sick. And it really kind of outlines what it takes for people with disabilities to get through their day. We can't always know what is going on with a person. And as Denise said, labels are for cans. We have no idea what's going on inside. So I guess I would just recommend that people don't pass judgment, check your assumptions and try not to judge someone if they're parking in an accessible spot and they aren't obviously disabled. It does not mean that they aren't disabled and that parking spot isn't helping them get through their day. It's just maybe one tool along their day that's helping them function, helping them be a better mom, dad, brother, helping them go to work, that sort of thing. So yeah, be careful with assumptions like that. We're all tempted to do it and it's understandable. The tragic thing is that some people, especially with invisible disabilities, will be challenged. They'll park in these parking spaces and someone will actually challenge them and get in their face and belittle them. And that's not something you want to do. I hope none of you ever find yourselves in that situation because you really don't know what's going on under the skin. And so, yeah, that's a really good question. So I appreciate that question. And anyone that's out there that has a question, just feel free to unmute yourselves and speak up, or you can throw it in the chat box.
May I add to that question there, Angel?
Yeah, please do, Shannon.
I would say also though that if you do park in a spot like that it's good also to make sure that you have a handicap plaque in your car, because depending on where you park, there is a potential to where you could get towed if somebody calls and say, hey, there's somebody parking in a handicap spot and they don't have a handicap plaque in their car. They could get towed even if they had a disability or not, because sometimes that could happen. So
that's a good point.
That's a good, just to protect yourself, to make sure if you do have a disability to have that in your car, because you get towed, then that person is not going to have is going to end up having a really bad day.
Yeah, they will. And I hope no one is parking in accessible parking spots that aren't allowed to, that are, that brings up the other side of that coin, doesn't it? Yeah, please don't park, even if it's just for a minute, for goodness sakes, you just really don't know. And the other thing too is when you pull up to an accessible parking spot, some of them are designed for vans with ramps for people to get in and out of. And sometimes you're going to park a little too close and you could quite by accident prevent a person from being able to get in and out of their accessible vehicle. So it just has to do with awareness when you're pulling into a spot, even if you're pulling into a spot that's not outlined as accessible. If you're next to one, just kind of pay attention to where their striping is and how much room they have, because once in a while, you will get someone that will need to put down a ramp and they need a little bit of room to make that turn. And the other thing, and I'm just going to say this one more little thing about this, it's one of my pet peeves, can you tell? When you're pulling up to a sidewalk and we in Savannah, we have beautiful hedges and that sort of thing. And there's especially when there's a spot next to you that's meant for accessible parking, try not to let your car overlap the sidewalk too much, because often the curb cut is a little bit further down the sidewalk and a person will access the sidewalk from the curb cut. and they'll come to your vehicle and can't get around it. They can't get past the hood of your car because there's not enough space on the sidewalk. So that's something to really keep in mind too when it comes. This is a really juicy topic when it comes to parking. So yeah.
Great answers. Can you
Okay. All right.
I didn't have any questions, but I did have a couple comments.
Yeah, please, Lori.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you guys. This was excellent and very, very well done. So thank you for hosting this today. I had a couple things that stood out. One was a good reminder when you're communicating with somebody who has an interpreter to still look at the person you're speaking with and not the interpreter, because that's a very easy thing to fall into. So it was a great reminder to hear that. So thank you. Also, just a personal story too, because as you all mentioned, the disabilities, whether it be physical or cognitive, can happen to anybody. Not everybody's born with it. Some are and some are not. And just for example, my mother had, and she passed away of brain cancer, but she was fine, but as those symptoms were developing, she was experiencing memory loss and very short-term memory, and would be constantly repeating things over and over. And so it teaches you quite a bit of patience, but it can happen to anybody. So it's just being hyper aware and sensitive to those around us, because as you all mentioned, we don't always know what's going on, and it can happen to everybody. So I felt that very personally. So thank you for covering that as well.
Thank you. Angel, would you also check the chat box to see if we have any questions?
Yep. Let's see. Another one came through. Which way is the best to get the attention of a person who is deaf or hard of hearing?
Well, I can jump in. I can answer that. You want to make sure that you're in good lighting, and you can either wave to get their attention. And also, if you're at a table, you can pound the table because they can feel the vibration. Another way is by stomping the floor, because it also creates a vibration that they can feel. And so those are some ideas. Or you can tap them on the shoulder. So either wave if they can see you and then you're in their line of vision, tap the table or stomp on the floor to create a vibration, or just simply tap them on the shoulder.
That's great. You know what? I actually never thought about the vibration before, Denise. Thank you for that. I usually will just make it a point to try to get in their line of vision. I'm always reluctant, and I think a lot of people are, to tap somebody unawares, but it really does. Sometimes it's just the common sense thing to do. It seems intrusive, but for a person, in my experience, who is deaf or hard of hearing, it's just something that you have to do. It's part of the communication process. So some people will say it's bad manners to tap someone, but in this instance, it might be the only way that you can safely get their attention. But that's a really good point about the vibration. I hadn't thought of that. Is there anybody else with questions? I do have one or two more that came through, but if anybody wants to chime in, this is your opportunity to ask these questions. If there's ever been anything on your mind, a question that you have, if it's something that we've covered or we haven't covered, I do hope you'll chime in. Okay, I have one here. What is the name of the mobility aid used by people of blind or low vision?
I could answer that one. One of the main mobility devices that's used by someone who's blind or low vision, and there's more than one, but one of the main ones is called a white cane. And a white cane is used like an antenna. You extend it in front of you and you tap it from side to side to feel the terrain, to feel if there's steps up or steps down, to feel there is a change, and also to navigate to get to where you're going. So white cane is a very useful device. And some individuals who are blind or low vision use a guide dog. And of course, with the guide dog, the dog goes through training to learn certain commands, and you give your guide dog the commands to go right, to go left, and it will help you to navigate wherever you need to go. But it's a personal choice. I personally prefer a cane because you don't have to clean up behind them.
Aw, I like guide dogs too. They're all great. There's a follow-up to that question, which is why does some canes look different than others? Why aren't they all the same?
Why do canes look different? I imagine because they're different types. They're support canes as well as the white cane. The white cane is used by people who are blind or low vision, but support canes are used for someone that may have limited physical mobility.
Okay. And here's a great question. Is it okay to use the accessible bathroom stall in a bathroom if you are not disabled? I imagine that's something we've all done. I mean, raise your hand if you've never done that. I think that everyone's done that. We think, you know, if it's full, there's nobody else in the restroom, that we go and do it. I think that the short answer probably is no. You don't necessarily want to use the accessible bathroom stall if you do not have a disability. And let me tell you why. Those stalls are designed specifically for wheelchair users in mind, even though it's not exclusively for wheelchair users. So if a person's using a wheelchair and they need to transfer from their wheelchair onto a commode to use it, they need to have those grab bars that you see in there, and they need to have the space to turn their wheelchair around. And not all wheelchairs are created equally in size. You've got some that are customized that have very small profiles, and you have some that are quite large because they're power chairs and they need to be that large. So those bathroom stalls are designed for that reason. And you really don't ever know when someone's going to come in and need to use that stall. And if there's other stalls available for you to use, it's really, it's not appropriate to use that bathroom stall just because it's more comfortable. You have more room to hang your coat or your purse or whatever. I get it. It's a nice space, but it is specifically designed for wheelchair users in mind, even though it's not exclusively for a person with a wheelchair. It is for people with disabilities in general. And once in a while, a person with a disability will need assistance in the restroom, and they need that extra space for the person that goes with them to assist them while they're in the restroom. So that's why they're designed the way they are. And there are usually not, you know, more than one. I think it would be great if they were all, I'm a universal design fan. I think all restrooms should be open and available as that size and created so that if more than one person comes in and needs that bathroom stall, there should be a second one. So I think they should all be designed that way. And I'm sure they're not for space reasons. But yeah, the short answer is no. I mean, there's times where if it's full and you absolutely need it, people are going to do it. It's going to happen. But just keep in mind when you're doing it that it is designed for a specific person. And if that person comes in and there's other bathroom stalls open that you could have used, and there's only one they could have used, yeah, it makes a difference. So it's about being mindful and aware and respectful. So I hope that that answered the question. I saw a comment here from Josephine that I thought was really great. Josephine, I hope you don't mind if I share this. You did put it out to everyone. It says, I have a disability tag on my plate and still get asked the questions when she goes out. So she got spicy with them. And yeah, I think that's okay, Josephine, that you stand up for yourself because sometimes you have to. And again, if you see the tag or you see the plate, then let's just assume that that person is entitled to be using that spot. And okay, great. Here's a question. Lori, would you like to ask your question or? Okay.
Sure. My concern is those needing to read lips and our current climate of wearing masks. How has that affected morale for or the difficulties being increased for those needing to read lips, and now we've blocked a part of their ability?
Yeah, it's really tough, especially in a medical setting. Because even in medical settings prior to COVID-19, a practitioner wouldn't necessarily have had their face covered. So I think where it's affecting them quite a bit are people that are out in the workforce. And with the masks in place, if they're needing to work and they relied on being able to read lips to do their work, yeah, it's having a big effect. There are masks out there that have the clear, and I think if someone's working with someone in an office, hopefully they've arrived at that accommodation. But I have heard some things and read some stories about people that are having those frustrations. And it's not just even a frustration, it's how they communicate. It's as if we would suddenly become deaf when we're used to hearing and not being able to do that. So there's ways around it. I think people are adaptable and they learn how to navigate in a world that's not designed for them. And I think most people will arrive at a solution, but that's a really good point. You know, morale, yes, certainly has been affected with the mask climate, but it's also understandable that the masks have to be there when you're talking about, you know, public health versus a person needing to kind of figure out and navigate this new normal. I wish someone was here that could speak to that from a more personal perspective. But from what I've seen and understood, it can be a real problem, especially in a medical setting. And because it kind of slows things down and you'll have to write things out and that sort of thing. So it's not ideal, but it's the climate that we live in for sure. James Averson had a comment. He said, a tag is not the same as a placard. A tag doesn't make it legal to park in an ADA space without a placard. James, can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, you can get an ADA tag for your car. It goes, you know, on the back or front, depending on the state. But it doesn't make it legal to park in an ADA space. You still need the hang tag that hangs from your mirror to be legal.
The hang tag?
I'm not sure about that because I was given the choice between the two, and when I got my tag, they said that would stand in the place of a placard when I got my authorization from the doctor and the state. So I haven't had any issues with just my tag.
They changed the law in the last 5 years or so. I know that.
It's been within 5 years since I've gotten mine, but I haven't had any issues with just my tag. It has the.
You probably won't, but just to be safe. You need to.
Yeah, it looks like Josephine said she was given the choice as well.
They wouldn't give me both. It was either a choice of the placard or the plate. So I chose the plate because it could stay on there longer than the year or so that a placard is available.
Well,
when you get that tag thing in your rearview mirror, you have to redo that every year or two.
4 years.
Of the
4 years.
4 years.
Okay. All right. Is there any more questions? Let's see. There was one that came across. Oh, I guess this is along this came up because of the bathroom thing, you know, asking that if it's okay to walk up wheelchair accessible ramps. Yeah, absolutely. Ramps kind of help everybody. It's kind of a nice side effect of the Americans with Disabilities Act and accessibility laws. And they help people with strollers, with shopping carts, with all kinds of things. And no, I mean, you don't want to block someone in a wheelchair that's trying to get down or that sort of thing. But yeah, no, it's fine. You can use ramps to get in and out of places if you need to, especially if you are using a cart or something along those lines. You'll see delivery people doing it all the time. It's another argument for universal design. I think all buildings should have these things, and it should just be standard. But it's an interesting question because it's an example of how everyone has benefited from the Americans with Disabilities Act and people with disabilities demanding access, which that's rightfully theirs. They're not asking for anything special. They're just asking for equal access, and those tools help them get access to those places. So yeah, absolutely use a ramp, but just don't park on it. Don't sit there and have lunch on it or be in someone's way, but absolutely utilize it and take advantage of the fact that someone fought pretty darn hard for that ramp to get there. So you might as well use it.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments?
Neil's got one.
Hey guys, I know we're starting to move towards the conclusion of this. I'm in the office, so I'm wearing a mask. Yay. But one of the things that I wanted to remind everybody of while we're in front of you guys is vote. Please go vote. I don't care who you vote for somebody, whoever you believe represents what you believe in, go out and vote. They're trying to make it as easy as possible. It's right now it's going to be relatively easy to find a polling location. I know it's gotten a little late as far as requesting absentee ballot. That time is probably past. However, with respect to going to polling locations, if you look on the Secretary of State website, you can check the My Voter page. You can see if you're registered to vote, see where you're registered to vote, and then you can look at early voting locations, and they are not particularly crowded. On election day, it's going to be a little bit different. And it's going to be higher risk. There's going to be a lot longer lines, more than likely, depending on where you're voting. So I would encourage you to get out and try to vote.
Our Facebook page, we're posting things every day about voting too. And Lori asked a question too that we'll get to when you're done, Neil.
Okay, and just and so if we can help you in any way, if you feel like there's any sort of barrier to you voting, please reach out to us. We'll work with you on that. We've been involved in a variety of voting groups trying to help promote the idea that everybody has a vote. And then the second thing I'd say is we're in the process of putting together a COVID committee, a CARES Act committee, to be able to identify what the needs are in the community that are not currently being met. We cannot make the world a fair place. We can't equalize everything. But what we're looking to do is identify where people's needs, especially that have come out of COVID, are occurring that are not being met by other organizations, or if they are being met by other organizations, that we know about them. So if you know about anything that's going on in our counties, if you know of a great resource, or if you're really struggling to find a specific resource, please reach out to us. I'll have a couple of my coworkers put their emails in our chat box. And by the way, that's a hint to a couple of my coworkers to put their emails in the chat box, and we'll move on from there. But I've got to grab this phone. But thank you all for being here, and I look forward to working with you moving.
Great, thanks. All good stuff. And Lori, you asked a really good question. Lori asked about representation, about accommodations when the landscape changes and for the city. What's happening now is there's actually a new quote unquote task force. It's actually a disability focused group called Savannah. And the mayor initiated this, and it's pulled in people from the different agencies and citizens in Savannah and Chatham County to address some of those very issues. And it's a new committee. The Savannah task force is new, and our focus right now is to, as we do the planning, make sure that things like what we've talked about today, which is universal design, is taken into account, and that our city is visitable. And that's kind of a hard word, say that 3 times fast. So that a person can come and know where they can go, know the places that are accessible, because we have a historic district that is notorious for not being accessible, and understandably so. You can't go back 200 years and redo all these buildings in a day, but you can lobby for curb cuts. You can lobby for accessibility when someone's renovating. You can lobby for bathrooms and restaurants that are accessible and things like that. And that's what we're looking at. And we're actually looking at other cities that have done a really good job of doing that, so that we can find out what they've done and bring into that. But yeah, I'm really glad you asked that, because Savannah is fairly new. And so, yeah, we're going to be sticking our noses into things and paying attention to what's going on, to what exists and what's coming up. So yeah, thanks for asking that question. Okay. And okay, well, we're coming up on 2 o'clock. I'm going to turn it back over to Denise unless anybody else has a question they want to sneak in before we wrap up. I don't see any hands raised and I don't see anything in the chat box. We'll give it a few more seconds because I know sometimes it takes a second to get stuff typed in. Okay, nope, I don't see anything. Someone did ask earlier whether or not we'd be willing to do this presentation for other agencies or community groups. And yes, absolutely. We're happy and available to do that. So it looks like it was Nola that asked about that. Thank you, Nola. And yeah, we're happy to do that. We did put our email addresses down in the chat box. If you want to grab one of those, you can reach out to any one of us and we can get that arranged. And for now, of course, because we're still practicing physical distancing, it would be an online format such as this. But as soon as we're back to doing things in person, we could do it in person as well. So thank you for asking that.
I just wanted to add, if I know we had a couple requests and people provided me their emails, but if somebody wants, a couple of people mentioned they really enjoyed that video clip, or if you just want more information, I think we're going to record this and we can send that along to you as well, if that's something that you're interested in. But if you are interested in receiving that from us, please just put your email address in the chat box. That way we can take it down and we can distribute whatever we have for people at that time. I've got the 2 individuals I spoke with via chat. I've got their information, but for anybody else who's interested, please just send. You can send it directly to me if you prefer to do that, or if you're okay with it being widely available, that's fine. But if you send it, just send it, do the private message to Neely.
Yeah, that's a great video.
And I'll take that down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, we've got one. JM Jones.
Did we actually record this, Angel, or no?
Yep, I'm fixing to cut the recording off.
Oh, okay.
I think we're wrapping up. And
I didn't hear you actually hit the record button on it.
yeah, I don't think you can hear it. It's silent.
Oh, okay.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. We're really excited about your being here. And so thanks again, and be on the lookout for more presentations from life.